Welcome to Getting Started with MySQL 8 tutorial. In this tutorial, I will teach you MySQL 8 from beginning. I will explain you how you can install the MySQL on Windows machine, start and stop the MySQL server, use the command line util tool to connect to the MySQL server, and after connecting to the MySQL server, you can perform various database related operations. We will show you how to create the database, then connect to the database. Once you connect it to the database, you can create tables, and under the table you can add the data or insert the data. Then I will show you how you can list down all the data from the table, update the data stored inside the table, delete all or any of the selected record from the database, and finally see how to delete the table. We will also see how to modify the table structure. I will show you how you can work with the various SQL queries, and finally I will show you how you can backup and restore your data. And finally I will show you how you can backup and restore your database. So let's get started. First of all, we have to download the MySQL 8 latest version for Windows and then install on the machine. For this, go to dev.mysql.com/downloads/installer, and here you will find the different version for the operating system. So mine is Windows 10, so I selected the Windows, and now I will click on the second link, that is Windows x86 32-bit MSI installer, and its size is 435 MB, and the current version at the time of recording this tutorial is 8.0.28. So let's click on the download. Either you can log in with your account or simply click on no thanks, just start my download. So the download is in progress. And it should finish in few seconds. I can directly click on open, and you can see the installer is now started. So this installer is started, and this installer is for MySQL installer community edition. So we have to wait for a few minutes. So we have to wait a little bit here. MySQL is an open source relational database management system, and it is one of the most popular relational database management systems. MySQL 8 is the latest version of MySQL at the time of recording of this video. MySQL 8 comes with many features such as transactional data dictionary, automatic data definition statement, automatic data definition statements, upgrade procedure, security and account management, resource management, InnoDB enhancements, persistent runtime configuration, document store, and many others. So developers are advised to migrate to the latest version of 8 to take the advantage of these features. Now the MySQL installer community edition is started, and it will take over 13 minutes. And it will take around 24 seconds to start. Now the MySQL installer is started. It is giving these options to install the MySQL. So setup type is developer default. So this is a default setting for the developers. So I'm going to install it for the developers. So I will be selecting the developer defaults. There is server only. So this is for server machines, client only. This is required when you just want to install the MySQL client tool and the MySQL Workbench so that you can connect to the MySQL server which is running on the remote machine. Full is for installing everything from the MySQL, and the custom you can select whatever you want. So I will select the developer defaults and click on the next. I will select the developer defaults, and it comes with the MySQL server, MySQL shell, MySQL router, MySQL workbench, MySQL for Visual Studio, MySQL connectors for Java, .NET, C++, and so on, and MySQL examples, and there is a documentation as well. So I will select the developer default and click next. So previously I think I installed the MySQL here. So I don't want anything from this old version. I can delete this. Yeah, this is a manual one. You can install it later. I will click next. Then the installer is going to install all these components. So click execute, and it will start installing these components one by one. And we can click on the show details, and here you can see what components it is being installed. So MySQL server is almost installed, and now it is installing the MySQL Workbench 8.0.28. MySQL Workbench is a GUI tool which can be used to connect to the MySQL database and work with the MySQL data. So it provides various options that can be used to handle the MySQL database much easily. It is also completed over around 73%. Now the installer is installing MySQL shell 8.0.28. So this shell is a command line utility which can be used to connect to the MySQL database server and interact with the server using the different DDL, that is data definition language, and the SQL commands. So in this tutorial I will show you how you can connect to the MySQL server using this MySQL shell as well. So I am pausing this video a little while so that all the components gets installed. So all the components of MySQL is installed successfully. We can click on next. And now the system is ready to configure our MySQL server, router, and then the examples. Click next. So this is the default configuration. I won't change anything here. So TCP IP port is 3306 and X protocol port is 33060. Click next. Click next. I will enter the root password and also add a user here. So from all host, and the role is admin. You can add more users here if you wish and click OK. Click next. Next. And we have to click on the execute. So on clicking the execute, system is going to perform these activities for us. I will pause this video a little while. Installer is successfully applied the configuration to the MySQL server 8.0.28, and now we can click finish to continue. Click next, and now we can configure the router. Click finish. Next. Click execute. So this is going to start the server. Now it is creating the sample databases schema onto the MySQL 8 on the MySQL server 8.0.28. Now the script successfully executed. We can click finish and everything is completed. Now we can cancel this. So we have successfully installed MySQL 8 on Windows 10 machine. Next thing is to test the client command line. So for this, type MySQL, and here you will see the MySQL command line. Click here, and it is asking for the root password. So we are connected to the MySQL server with the MySQL client. Now you can list down the database with the show databases command. So it is displaying the currently installed the show databases command, displaying all the databases we have onto the MySQL server. Now I will show you MySQL Workbench. So in the search bar, search for MySQL Workbench and click on MySQL Workbench 8.0 CE, that is Community Edition. MySQL Workbench can be used to connect to the database, and this is the connection to the MySQL localhost. Now after clicking, it is connected. The first command is to show the databases here, and you can see the list of databases we have. So this is a world database, and you can click here and then select rows. The MySQL Workbench allows you to work with the tables, databases, and then the data is stored inside the table. Yeah, you can perform different type of query here. For example, select start from world where id equal to 1. So this way you can perform an different type of query operations onto the MySQL server. So this tool is very easy. So this tool is very useful for managing the database. Later you can explore this tool. Now I will show you how to use the MySQL database. So first of all, I will show you how to create a So first thing is to create the database. So databases are used to organize the tables into the database. So on MySQL server, you can have multiple databases. For example, we are going to create the SQL tutorials database. So now the database is created and it is saying query OK, one row affected. If I run the command show databases, it should list down the SQL tutorials database. Now to connect, now you can also drop a database with the command drop database SQL tutorials. So without asking any question, it is going to drop the database. So if you are dropping the database, it is going to delete all the tables and the data is stored inside the table, and you won't be able to recover the data. So this drop database command you should use very carefully. Now we will create the database again, because we have to work with this database in this tutorial. So database is created, and before performing any of the SQL operations inside the database, you have to connect to the database. So to connect to the database, there is a command called connect, SQL command connect, and the database name. So we are connected to the SQL tutorials database, and now I will check if there is any tables inside the database. It should not, because we just created the database and it is a simple blank database without any table. Now there is a SQL command to create the table. To store the data into the relational database, you have to create tables inside the database. So SQL command for creating the table is create table, then table name and the data types, field and its data type. ID is the integer type which is not null and auto increment. Username, its size is varchar 200. Email address, which is varchar 400, and we are defining primary key as ID. Auto increment will automatically increment the primary key value. For example, it will start from 1, then keep on increasing 1 at a time when new record is created. So this table is now created, and if we run the store tables SQL, it is going to display the table name. And you can also see the structure of existing table. So the SQL command is describe email. So describe email is going to describe the structure of email table. So fields are ID, username, email address. ID is of integer type, username is varchar type, and email address is again varchar type. So this is the maximum length for username. So in username we can store maximum of 200 characters. Similarly, in email we can store maximum of 400 characters. So this way we are limiting the data stored in the field into the field. So MySQL supports many different data types that we will see in some advanced in other videos. For now, it is int and varchar we will be using. So show tables command is showing the table. Now describe email is describing the email table, and now we can also insert the data into the table. So insert into email, then here you have to specify the field name. First field is username, second is email address, email underscore add, and the values is usual, and email ID is usual at roseindia.net. Then now we can click enter. So query is okay, one row affected. This means one record is inserted into the email table. Now we can run the query, select star from email. So it is displaying the records stored inside the email table, and you can see this ID is 1 here. In the insert statement we did not specify the ID because it is auto increment type, and MySQL generated the ID for this automatically. So after fetching all the records, you can see the record here. Now I want to update the record into the table. So to update the record, there is a SQL query update, then table name set. So inside in the set you have to specify the field name and the new value and the conditions for selecting the record. So where ID equal to 1, so it is going to update this record. So one row is matched and one field is changed. Now I can run the SQL query and see this email address is updated. Now we can insert another row into the MySQL table. So for this we will be running the another insert into statement. So insert into email, username, email address, value is David and David at roseindia.net, and again one record is added to the database. Now we can select star from email, and you will see there is another record, and the ID primary key ID is 2. So this ID is incremented by 1, and if we insert another record, again ID will be incremented by 1. So we don't have to maintain this ID, and MySQL is automatically incrementing it for us. So we have seen how to add the data to the MySQL table, update the data into the MySQL table, and now we will see how we can delete the data from MySQL table. So once you delete any of the record, you cannot retrieve back again. So you should run the delete query carefully. So delete from email where ID equal to 1. So it is going to delete a record whose primary key is 1. Hit enter, and query OK, one row affected, and this first is deleted. Now we will run the command select star from email, and you can see uh, first record is not there. So there are times when there is no requirement of any table. So MySQL provide the command drop table and table name. So this drop table is going to drop a table. So it is going to drop the table and delete all the records. So this is unrecoverable, and you cannot recover the data once table is deleted. So MySQL table is deleted. If I run the query select star from email, it should say email does not exist. So you can also delete the database that I also showed you earlier, but now we are not going to delete the table. Now I can show you how you can modify the table structure. So we will use the previous query to create the table again. So this table is created, and you can see tables. So email table is there, and I want to add a new column to this table, email table. So for this alter table command is used. So alter table email and add column full name varchar 150. So this is added one row, one column to the table. So describe email, and you can see there is another field called full name here. So this way you can create a table. This way you can modify a table structure. Now we are going to insert some of the data here. I will modify query little bit because the field is one more field is added, full name, and I can write David M or whatever. So this is so one record is added here. So there is an important concept of restoring and backing of the data. So as a developer or as a administrator, you should learn about the backing of the data. So there are three ways you can take the backup of your database table and data is stored inside it. You can choose any of these methods as per your business need. Here are three ways you can take the backup of MySQL server database. First is full backup of database and tables. So here a backup file will contain the complete structure of the database and tables inside it, as well as all the data of stored into the table. Backup of table structure only. So I mean, for example, you are developing the application and you have to deploy it onto the dev environment for, sorry, you have to deploy on the test environment. Then in that case, you can just take the structure only backup and create the tables structure onto the new database. Backup of data. So this is required when you don't want to include the SQL queries to create the table. Instead, you just want to take the backup of the data. Let us learn all these methods one by one and experiment with it. Full backup. How to take the full backup of all the tables and data. So for this, you can use the MySQL dump -u admin -p password. So this username and password you can change as per your credentials. And this is the table name and greater than sign and SQL tutorials. So this will create the backup of SQL tutorials database into the SQL tutorials.sql. You can also use this query if you don't want to put the password in the command line. So -p option will ask you the password. Similarly, to take the backup of table only structure, you can specify no data option, and to take the big backup of only data, you can specify no create info option while running the MySQL dump. And to take restore, you have to run the command MySQL -u admin -v admin SQL tutorials data, which is a database name, and then the less than sign and the SQL name. You can also use this command. So let's try it. We're going to open the terminal in the as an administrator, and now I will go to this directory, and inside this directory I have the MySQL admin util. So we are going to run this full backup command. So you can see this is the full backup of the table database. It is creating the table here, dropping the table if exists, and creating table, and finally inserting the data like this. You can try the second one where it is just taking the backup of structure only. And this is for the create only. So it is just for the database, or it is just for the data. Now I will run the full backup. This is the full backup of the data. It is dropping the table, creating the table, and finally inserting the data. Now I will show you how you can restore the data. Now you connected to the skill tutorial, and you can also run the source and this path slash SQL tutorials, the file name, and it is running the query. So this way you can take the backup of the database and restore using the various MySQL tool. So you can visit our website roseindia.net/mysql, roseindia.net/mysql, and learn the MySQL tutorials here. Thanks for watching the video and subscribe our channel.